I found the letter on a Wednesday morning, wedged between a catalog and a coupon flyer. It had no return address, just my name and familiar handwriting that used to spell out birthday wishes and Christmas tags. My mother's handwriting. I stared at it, unmoving, my coffee growing cold beside me. We hadn't spoken in 6 years. Not since the day I walked out of their house and vowed never to look back. Not after what they did to me. Still, my hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No dear. Just 5 chilling words. We need to talk. Urgently. That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just an order, like I was still that girl expected to drop everything because family comes first. But family hadn't come first when they signed over my inheritance to my brother. Family hadn't mattered when they stood silent while I was cast out of the family business like a liability. And yet, part of me felt something tighten in my chest. I tucked the letter into the drawer next to the phone bill I hadn't paid yet and went about my day. Or tried to. But those 5 words pulsed behind my eyes like a siren. That evening, I called the one person who had always told me the truth, no matter how ugly it was. "Lena," said Jasmine, her voice sharp with concern. "You're not thinking of going back, are you?" "I just want to know why now," I said. "Why after all these years?" Jasmine sighed. "Maybe it's not about you. Maybe they need something." I swallowed hard. That's what I was afraid of. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Didn't pack an overnight bag. Didn't wear anything special. Just jeans, a jacket, and the same guarded heart I'd worn for years. The drive to my childhood home felt surreal. The same cracked sidewalk. The same mailbox, dented from that one summer when we used to play baseball in the yard. But the house felt smaller somehow. I rang the doorbell. It was my brother who opened the door. Daniel. His face froze when he saw me, like he hadn't actually expected I'd come. "Lena," he said slowly. "You look well." I stepped inside without answering. The living room hadn't changed. The same curtains. Same framed photo of all of us from the beach trip when I was 16, before everything shattered. Then I saw her. My mother stood in the kitchen, wiping a perfectly clean counter. "Lena," she said, voice too calm. "Thank you for coming." I waited for more. An apology. A tremble in her voice. Something. But there was nothing. "I got your letter," I said flatly. "What's so urgent?" She hesitated, glanced at Daniel, then back at me. "We need your signature," she said. "On a few documents. For the house. It's a minor thing, really." My blood went cold. Why would my signature be required? Daniel cleared his throat. "Because your name is still on the deed. From when Dad transferred part of the property to all 3 of us. Remember? For tax reasons." I remembered. I also remembered being told it was symbolic. That it meant I'd always have a place in this family. That we were equals. I had believed them then. But that was before they cut me off. Before they rewrote the will to leave everything to Daniel. Before they told me I was too emotional to be part of the business anymore. I looked at both of them. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not remove me years ago?" Neither answered. And suddenly, I understood. They didn't forget. They didn't forgive. They just didn't expect I'd still matter. And now, they needed me. "Let me think about it," I said, turning toward the door. Their silence followed me down the steps. But this time, it wasn't mine to carry. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the clock like it was counting down to something inevitable. Their faces wouldn't leave my mind, Daniel's tight jaw, my mother's blank eyes. Not once did they ask how I'd been. Not once did they say they were sorry. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time I felt like I belonged in that house. It was the day I signed the paperwork. Just routine, Dad had said back then, sliding the documents across the dining table. We're putting the house in all three of your names. It's symbolic, really. Like a legacy, Daniel added, smiling that easy, charming smile he always used to disarm me. We're building something that lasts. And I believed them. I remember how proud I felt. Finally being trusted. Finally being told I was part of the future. But 2 years later, when the company went through its first restructuring, I was the only one asked to step aside for the sake of optics. Daniel stayed. Daniel got promoted. I was told to take time to focus on other things. Other things like silence. Like distance. And then came the will change. They didn't even tell me. I found out by accident when a former board member reached out and asked if I'd be attending the new leadership vote. What vote? I had asked. He paused. Oh. I thought you knew. Daniel's being named sole heir. That was the moment something in me broke. Not because I wanted the company. But because I realized they never intended for me to stay. I sat up on the couch, rubbed my temples, and whispered to no one, so why now? Why pretend I mattered? Why reach out only when they're backed into a legal corner? And then it hit me. This wasn't about family. It never was. It was about control. And I had something they needed. This time, I had the power. And I had no intention of giving it away. The next morning, I stood at the kitchen counter, fingers curled around a chipped mug, the same one I'd used the year I moved out. I never replaced it. I guess I liked the reminder of broken things that still worked, of pieces that didn't need to be perfect to be useful. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Just checking in. Do you have time to come by again today? We can go over the paperwork. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the property records. It had been so long since I'd even thought about that signature, about what it meant. But there it was, in black and white, my name, legally listed as a 1/3 owner of the house. Not just symbolically. Legally. I leaned back in my chair, breathing in the stillness. So this wasn't just about smoothing over a document. They couldn't move forward without me. And suddenly, I saw it all for what it was. They had built their entire plan assuming I would stay silent. That I'd do what I always did, nod, cooperate, disappear. But they forgot that the girl who used to need their approval had been buried years ago. I took a screenshot of the deed, saved it to a new folder titled, simply, Leverage. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the one person who knew every corner of our family's tangled history. Audrey? I said when she answered. I need your help. Audrey had been my best friend since high school. She knew every wound before it scarred. She also happened to be an estate lawyer. Lena, she said slowly, already reading my tone. What's going on? I told her everything, about the letter, the request, the silence before it. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. Do you want to walk away? Or do you want them to understand what it's like to need someone who isn't bending anymore? I didn't answer immediately. I watched a squirrel leap across the fence in the yard, frantic and determined. I want to remind them, I said finally, who they left behind. That afternoon, I returned to the house, but not alone. Audrey was by my side, briefcase in hand, heels clicking sharp against the pavement like punctuation marks. Daniel opened the door, expression flickering when he saw her. Is this? My legal counsel, I said simply. If this is about signatures, I want everything in writing. My mother appeared behind him, lips thinning. Lena, we didn't think this needed to be dramatic. No, I replied, stepping inside. You thought it would be easy. We sat in the dining room. The same room where birthdays were celebrated, mine always with the smallest cake. Audrey opened her folder, clicked a pen, and laid out a single piece of paper. "This document," she said, "details the terms under which Lena will consider signing her share of the property over." Daniel frowned. "Consider? You thought I'd just hand it over?" I asked, voice calm. "After what you all did?" My mother's arms crossed. "We didn't do anything. You walked away." I leaned in. "Because you made it clear I didn't belong." The silence cracked like glass. Audrey slid the paper toward them. My mother read it, her face blanching. "You want compensation?" "No," I said, "I want acknowledgement." "A letter," Audrey clarified, "signed and notarized, admitting Lena's role in the founding of the company. Her financial contributions, labor, and strategic work in the early years. Full credit. Public credit." Daniel scoffed. "That's ridiculous." "Then don't sign," Audrey said coolly. "But you won't get the house either." My mother looked at me, eyes narrowing. "Is this revenge?" I shook my head. "No. This is history. Written correctly." They tried to negotiate. Of course they did. They offered a check. An apology over coffee. An accidental compliment buried under a sigh. But I didn't budge. I stood, gently pushing my chair back. "You can take your time," I said. "But the next time you reach out to me, know this: Alina, the obedient daughter, the quiet one who stayed grateful for scraps, she doesn't live here anymore." Audrey followed me to the door. Before we stepped outside, I turned one last time. "And next time you need something," I added, "make sure you're talking to someone who owes you something." I didn't look back as the door clicked shut behind me. But I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking toward myself. I didn't expect silence to feel so loud. For 3 days, there was nothing, no messages, no calls, not even the obligatory check-in from one of my distant cousins who always played both sides. I went back to work, back to my quiet apartment with the sun-bleached curtains and the plant I kept forgetting to water. But something inside me buzzed like a wire pulled too tight. It wasn't guilt. It was vigilance. Because people like them don't retreat. They regroup. On the 4th day, I got an email. Not from my brother. Not from my mother. But from a lawyer I didn't recognize. Subject: concerning property resolution. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made tea, swept the floor, rearranged the books on my shelf, anything to delay that moment. Then I sat down, clicked it open, and read. They were contesting the request. Apparently, acknowledging my contributions could damage the family brand. They wanted to offer a private note of gratitude instead. No legal recognition. No public trace. A footnote at best. A thank you card in a box of silence. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. Across the street, a little girl was drawing chalk hearts on the sidewalk. She was talking to herself, smiling, fully lost in her world. I envied her for a moment, for believing, maybe, that love was something you could draw in bright pink and it would stay. My phone rang. It was Audrey. "They're testing you," she said without greeting. "I know," I replied. "They want to see if I'll fold." "Will you?" I thought about that for a moment. Then I told her the truth. No. That evening, I drafted a letter. Not to them. Not to the lawyer. To myself. I wrote down everything I had done for the business. From the late nights managing accounts to the travel I paid for out of my own pocket. I listed every pitch I helped polish, every deal I helped close, every time I let Daniel take credit because it made things easier. And then I wrote this sentence at the bottom. You were never invisible. They just chose not to look. I printed it out and taped it to my mirror. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about remembering. By the end of the week, a new headline popped up in the local business journal: family-owned retailer faces ownership dispute amid sibling rift. I hadn't spoken to the press. But someone had. The article was vague but pointed, mentioning internal tensions, disagreements over succession, and the sudden resurfacing of a former stakeholder with undocumented but critical early contributions. My phone lit up. Daniel. I let it ring. Then came a text. Did you seriously go to the media? I typed back one word. No. He replied instantly. Then who did? I let him sit in that panic. People who think they hold all the cards never handle uncertainty well. Eventually, he called again. I answered this time. His voice was tight. Controlled. The voice he used when trying to sound reasonable while barely restraining his temper. Lena, we can't keep doing this. It's getting out of hand. Then fix it, I said calmly. You're going to ruin everything over a paragraph in a letter? No, I said. You already did that when you erased me. He exhaled loudly, the sound of a man losing ground. I'll talk to Mom, he said. Maybe we can add something. Quietly. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Because I knew what that meant. He was cracking. And the louder the silence got on their side, the more I knew I was being heard. That weekend, I visited the edge of town where our flagship store still stood. The one with the red awning and the crooked sign I'd always meant to fix. I parked across the street, just far enough not to be noticed. There it was, my past in bricks and dust. A woman stepped out of the door with her young son. She knelt to tie his shoe, laughing at something he said. She looked happy. Safe. And I remembered something from years ago. Her name was Sarah. She'd been a cashier when I was managing the front desk. One afternoon, she'd broken down in the back room, shaking and scared because her rent check had bounced and she didn't have enough to buy groceries. I gave her $200 from my own wallet. Told her it was a bonus. Told Dad I'd made a mistake in the till so the books balanced. He never asked. Never cared. Just said, be more careful next time. Sarah never knew the truth. And I never asked for anything in return. But as I watched her now, smiling and whole, I felt something lift off my chest. They could pretend I hadn't mattered. But I had. Quietly. Relentlessly. I turned on the engine and drove away. Not because I was done fighting. But because I'd already won. They just didn't know it yet. 2 days after the article ran, my mother called me. Not Daniel. Not a lawyer. Her. Lena, she began, her voice syrupy and unfamiliar, like she was trying to remember how softness worked. I didn't say anything. I don't know what you think you're proving. There it is, I cut in, the tone I remember. She sighed. We've kept things running, kept the business alive. You left, remember? You don't know what we've gone through. I don't, I admitted. But I know what I built. And I know how you erased it. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, so what do you want? There it was. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement. Just a transaction. I answered without hesitation. Full credit. On paper. In public. Or I don't sign. And if you delay again, I'll submit my own statement to the board. You wouldn't. I already did. The line went quiet. Then, she hung up. It was Audrey who got the next call. Daniel, sounding more like a man trying to catch a falling ceiling than a brother. They're backing out, she said after the call ended. One of the investors. The legal conflict spooked them. I nodded. I wasn't surprised. They can't move the house. They can't restructure their assets. And their name isn't worth much if it's attached to a headline about betrayal. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you want to take the business down?" I considered that for a moment. "No," I said. "But I want them to know it was me who held the last piece." Because power isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about standing so still, so unyielding, that the empire collapses from the pressure of its own lies. The next morning, I found a large envelope on my doorstep. It was thick, formal, sealed with the family crest in wax. Inside was a letter. Typed. Signed. Stamped. It acknowledged my role. My investment. My early leadership. Every line, meticulously drafted by someone who had finally realized I wasn't bluffing. There was no apology. Just truth. But truth was all I needed. There was also a deed transfer form, relinquishing my third of the house in exchange for full public credit and a silent payout. Audrey reviewed it twice. "Legally solid," she said. "No tricks." I signed it. Not for them. For me. 3 weeks later, I stood at the back of a small event hall. The company was hosting an anniversary celebration, 25 years in business. There was champagne, a slideshow, and an uncomfortable amount of nervous glances when I entered. Daniel was at the podium. He paused halfway through his speech and looked straight at me. "And we want to acknowledge Lena," he said, voice stiff but clear. "For her work, her leadership, and her vision. Without her, none of this would exist." People clapped. Some politely. Some genuinely. I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't proud. But because the moment wasn't for them. It was for every version of me they tried to forget. I walked home that night, heels in hand, moonlight brushing the pavement. When I reached my apartment, there was a message on my phone. From Sarah, the woman from the store all those years ago. She'd read the article. "I always knew it was you holding the place together," she wrote. "Thank you." I sat on my couch, letting her words sink in like warmth after a long winter. Not all victories come with banners. Some come with whispers. With names remembered. Stories rewritten. Truths finally spoken aloud. And as I folded the letter from the family and tucked it into my drawer, I whispered something to myself I hadn't dared believe for years. I was never the extra. I was the foundation. And they finally saw it, just as I stopped needing them to.